What is up, guys, and welcome to QnA, the show where I take your questions and answer them here on this show. This QnA is going to be wrapping up all the questions that you had after the Browns' second preseason game. There were a ton of questions, so let's just kind of jump into it and get started. And the first question is going to be from Robbie Thiel, who says, how do you see the cut downs at wide receivers coming along? Any chances that Davis could sneak in and possibly at the expense of Kadero Hodge? Davion Davis is who he's referring to, number 18. He's made some outstanding plays in camp and some even more, quite frankly, outstanding plays in the preseason games, and he's made a good showing for himself. The issue for him is that this Browns wide receiver room is extremely crowded, right? There's Kadero Hodge, who we know as kind of a bit player from last year. He's been a bit player the last few years, actually. He was there in 2019, had a decent year for what his role was there even then. But if you look at the room, it's crowded. You got Jarvis Odell. They're not going anywhere. You got Rashard Higgins, Donovan Peoples-Jones as the second line. They're not going anywhere. So those four are very solid. And then you have Kadero Hodge. You have guys like Davion Davis. You got JoJo Natson, who might figure in there at wide receiver, and then Demetric Felton might figure in that wide receiver conversation as well. I don't know if there's anybody else I'm forgetting at this point. Jamarcus Brantley is another guy who might figure into that wide receiver room. So when it comes down to that, right, you know you're going to keep 6 wide receivers. Oh, Anthony Schwartz also in there, right? So 5 of these guys you already know have roster spots. Anthony Schwartz, unless he gets put on IR, it's going to make the team, going to take up a roster spot. Probably going to be inactive all year, but still going to make the team, going to make a roster spot, right? So there's that. Then you have the 4 guys I already mentioned that are locks, leaves you about 1 spot for an extra wide receiver. Davion Davis could take that spot. The Browns could maneuver and just cut Dearness Johnson, who's a really good running back, as their third running back, but just put Demetric Felton there because they feel like he can be just as good at that third running back role and also add value when it comes to kick returning and punt returning, and also as a wide receiver, right? So he offers a ton of value, and keeping him, right, allows you to get rid of Dearness Johnson. It allows you to let go a JoJo Natson because you won't need JoJo to do the kick return stuff. And JoJo's role, unfortunately, is kind of redundant with Anthony Schwartz having to make the roster. You know, he's a speed guy, and JoJo Natson's also a speed guy. Anthony Schwartz a little bit faster, a little bit taller, a little bit more capable of a wide receiver. You would think down the line, and he's somebody they obviously have plans for in the future. So there is that whole situation. And then you have the battle between that last spot, which ends up being the way I'm seeing it. Now, this might not be how Kevin Stefanski's looking at it, and that's fine if it's not. But it might end up being Kadero Hodge versus Davion Davis for that spot. I like Davion, but Kadero Hodge is bigger, been on the team longer, has more reps with Baker Mayfield, so it's probably going to end up being Kadero, especially since he's had a really good camp too as well. He caught a touchdown this last preseason game. So overall, it's a real tough situation for anybody to make this team at a wide receiver. Now, as far as Davion's future, I think he's put enough together that he should get picked up by a team on their active roster. There are teams that aren't as deep as the Browns are at wide receiver this year. So, he should be able to get a shot. If not, I think they'll gladly welcome him on the practice squad in case another break glass, in case of emergency situation happens with the wide receivers like it did last year versus the Jets. So great question there. Great way to start us off. The next question comes from Philip Harmon, who says, hey, Q, with the concerns on the interior defensive line, what are some of the potential moves that the Browns can make to shore up the unit? This is why I'm a little concerned about the interior defensive line. I just don't think at this point it's safe to project that there's any moves they can really do to fix this. One, because it's not really common to trade for an interior defensive lineman during the season. It just hasn't been done a lot. Two, it's hard to project what players are going to be cut from where, and the market's pretty dried up as far as free agents go, so you're not really going to get anybody in that market. So maybe you get lucky and a team cuts a good player and you're able to fill that role with a good player, or maybe Andrew Billings plays better once the season starts. That's always a possibility. Also, maybe the way the Browns scheme things might make that interior defensive line deficiency less noticeable, right? Like that's always an option here for how the Browns can handle this. I don't think the solution for this problem is going to be signing more personnel. I don't think they can afford to have another guy on this defensive line on yet another 1-year deal that's going to be gone. At some point, they have to build towards the future at that position. They have to find some long-term answers there, and they can't keep going 1 year, 1 year, 1 year, 1 year, because you get results like you've been getting the last few years. When you keep going 1 year, you get no consistency. You never know what you're going to get on a given play. And, you have a lack of chemistry between everybody else on that defensive line and the guys on the inside. Now, again, Malik Jackson might change things. Andrew Billings might play better in the regular season. I just have no reason to believe as of this point right now, based off of everything that I've seen, training camp and preseason combined, that this interior defensive line is going to be any better than it was last year with Larry Ogunjobi and Sheldon Richardson. I have no reason to believe that, and that is a concern. And as far as fixing that, there's really nothing you can do about that right now. You're just kind of stuck with the cards that you have been dealt, or cards you dealt yourself in this case. The next question comes from Liberty Outdoor Adventure, who says, do you think it's smart not to get the starters at least a couple of series of action in the preseason? Most experienced coaches are playing their starters. Now, this might be due to habit, right? Why coaches are playing their starters. We all got routines that we just feel better about how our day is going to go if we just do these routines, right? That just might be what the veteran coaches are doing. They have a routine to start the season. They're going to do their routine because that's what makes them feel good about the season coming up. And, you look at Bill Belichick, that's what he's doing. Look at Bruce Arians, Andy Reid. All the older coaches are doing that. And I think that's more so based on, look, we have a rhythm, we have a routine, and I feel much better when we do our routine. It's just like waking up in the morning, right? You have your routine, and if you can't do your routine, you feel like the day is going to be off and things aren't going to go right, and you just don't feel right about it mentally. That's really, I think, what a lot of the preseason ends up being when it comes to putting players out there. Now, there is a real difference, because I've been hearing this from people, from what a preseason game is and what a training camp practice is, especially in today's NFL, especially for the Cleveland Browns, because I've heard a lot of people saying, hey, well, they got that practice in with the Giants, so that's like 2 preseason games, so they don't need to play their starters. I'm going to call BS on that. I don't think that's remotely even close to true. One, in a practice, a joint practice, you're not moving the ball up and down the field. You're not in the normal rhythm of a football game, and you're not tackling to the ground. The only thing the preseason is really important for is making sure people are ready to take full contact and to give full contact when the regular season starts, so they're not out of practice once that starts. Everything else is kind of overblown about the preseason. Anything that people try to glean about the coaching and the scheming and stuff, like it's a little far-fetched when we're talking about bad coaching in the preseason. Like, I don't think you can really glean if a coach is good or bad in the preseason. Hugh Jackson went undefeated in the preseason the year he didn't win any games in the regular season, for goodness sake. So those things about the preseason can tend to be overrated. But the actual physical aspect of wrapping somebody up and tackling them to the ground and meaning it is much different than a joint practice, is much different than a contact period in a training camp, because the fact is, the Cleveland Browns especially, they're not tackling to the ground in these practices. And that could result in bad tackling once the season starts. It's something that takes like 3 weeks to correct. It's not the biggest deal in the world if they don't do it, but it is something that could be there. And again, the Browns are in a position to where their goals are super high, and they don't really have the room for error to drop, games like they did last year, right? This year, unlike last year, you're not going to be happy with this team if they drop that weird game to the Raiders, or they drop that weird game to the Jets, right? That's a room for error that they don't have afforded to them based on the expectations, rightfully so, that this roster is getting itself come the season, right? Like, we can try to kid ourselves all we want and say, hey, we'll just be happy if this Browns team makes the playoffs or makes the AFC Championship game. But in 10 years, we're going to be looking back at this roster and say, man, why couldn't we get it done, especially if this team can stay healthy? So that being where the expectations realistically are is a team that you feel like has a chance to actually get the job done. You don't want these little things to pop up during the season. You want to do everything you can. Now, that doesn't mean you put the starters out there for 4 quarters or anything, but I would like it if they put the starters out there for a couple of drives. I would like it if we got just the back 7. I don't need to see Myles Garrett. I don't need to see Jadeveon Clowney. Their job really don't change preseason, regular season. There's nothing really to practice there, right? But for the back 7, when it comes to communication, when it comes to tackling people in the space, like most of the time they have to do, yes, I do want to see them do that. For the offense, I don't need to see them to do anything, right? Like the offensive line, maybe you want to get them used to some physical contact before the season starts. But other than that, there's really nothing I need to see out there. So when I say I want the Browns to put some starters out there for this last preseason game, I'm saying it because there are some things we are just very unsure about this defense based on all the new players there that I think they should at least get an eye on how that looks in a real game situation. I understand they have practices, but practice periods are nothing like actual game periods. And I do think there is some value in getting those guys some reps. But that's my thoughts on that whole situation there. Not to second guess Kevin Stefanski. I don't even know what Kevin Stefanski's doing. You're asking me but people are asking me my opinion on this. I'm just giving my opinion on it. I do think that would make me feel a lot better about this team going. The next question comes from Mark, who says, week 1 is only 2 weeks away. Is there anything you've seen from the preseason that will make a meaningful impact for week 1 when we match up against the reigning AFC champions? I think JOK, probably, right? If he plays like he did in week 1 of the preseason against the Kansas City Chiefs, that's going to be a game changer. Everything else, I just have not been able to see, right? All the things that you think you're going to be game changers, John Johnson, Myles Garrett, Jadeveon Clowney, you just haven't been able to see. So I don't know. But if there's one thing I've seen in this preseason, it's been JOK. And, I do think he can be an impact player versus the Kansas City Chiefs. The next question comes from Josiah, who says, what do you think Demetric Felton's role would be? Kick returner, slot receiver, or running back? All of them, right? All of them. I think he's going to play slot. I think he's going to play running back. He's going to kick return. His value as far as making the team this year, because he's not going to be in the regular running back rotation if everybody's healthy, realistically, is being able to do everything else, right? Being able to fill the roles of what would be 2 or 3 players on a roster, and being able to consolidate that into one guy that you can keep on this team and that can allow you to keep other players at other talented positions on the team. That's his main role this year, and I think he's going to play that one to perfection, hopefully. The next question comes from Them Boys, who says, love the content. Do you think Malik McDowell would be safer bet to make the roster if he reverted back to DN? Also, who is the most likely DT not to make the roster? Well, I mean, there's a ton of guys that won't make the roster. I think the only guy on the bubble really that we've been talking about regularly is Marvin Wilson. I think Sheldon Day is going to make the team. I think a good amount of people. I don't know if Malik McDowell is going to make the team, and I don't know if him playing defensive end is going to have him make the team. The fact is, defensive tackle is probably the easiest position for him to make the team because at defensive end, they're pretty set. Whenever Tack comes back, it'll be Tack, it'll be Myles, it'll be Porter Gustin, and probably like Joe Johnson or something like that. The fourth spot would be really hard to get versus defensive tackle, where they're probably going to let an undrafted guy on the roster, and the battle was really between him and the undrafted guy. So I think his best chance was this year at defensive tackle. This next question comes from Shimmy, who says, thoughts on Myles Garrett being ranked 16th in the NFL top 100? All right, let me start this off by saying the NFL top 100 list is pretty nonsensical. You know what I mean? There are some rankings every once in a while that make sense, and there are some rankings that don't. So, let's have fun with the top 100 versus take it deadly serious as if this is something that players are going to use in contract negotiations to be I was 16th in the NFL. It's nobody takes this seriously. It's not supposed to be taken seriously. It's just a fun piece of entertainment. There's no need to get in an argument on Twitter about anybody's ranking, no matter what team or player you love when it comes to the NFL top 100. It is pointless. it is pointless. That being said, they put Myles Garrett at 16. I feel like that's about right for the season Myles Garrett had. If he had finished the season like he had started the season, he probably would have been higher than 16. But yeah, 16th best player in the NFL. It's about right. I actually think, and this might be a hot take, that most of the rankings for the Cleveland Browns in there, well, all four of them were pretty fair, right? They had Nick Chubb at 24 or 23, somewhere around there. I think that was fair. Baker Mayfield at 70, I think that was fair. Jarvis Landry at 94, I think that was fair. I think all those rankings are fair. Now, if you look at those rankings and then you look at who they had ranked ahead of them at similar position groups, then you start to pull your hair out. But if you just look at the ranking alone, Myles Garrett at 16, that's fine. Baker at 70, Nick Chubb at 20-something, and then Jarvis at like 94. Those are all fine. But then when you look at it and they got Kyler Murray at like 35 and then Justin Herbert at like 50, then you start to go, whoa, wait a minute. That doesn't seem right. But just taking it based on what they ranked it, I'm fine with it. It's whatever. It's the NFL Top 100. It's more about the video packages that they release than it is about the ranking. That's what I always take out of it, right? I just want, my favorite Browns to make the list just so I can see the fun little video package they produce about it. It really ain't about the ranking, and it's not really to be taken that serious. But thank you for all those questions. Again, guys, thank you for watching, and have a great day, and have a good night.